our subject today is from the notebook of a monastic. Why would I have chosen that kind of a subject just at this time? Well, there are several reasons. And one of them is obvious, and that is that on New Year's Eve day, I was pretty sure there would be very few people here, and that those who came would be very earnest. So I think I am properly rewarded in that supposition. A very close group should be exposed to the notebook of a monastic. However, it's only the first of what I hope will be a long series of such Sundays. Because, you know, after a number of years in this life, one accumulates an enormous treasure of notes. One goes on taking down what the Swamis and monks are saying. One is fascinated by this. They get put into the notebooks and the pages accumulate. And once in a great while, I've had the opportunity for leisure, like being sick in the hospital, to go back and look at the notes again and see what they said. When Sri Ramakrishna was living, and he used to hold forth in his inimitable way in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar, there were two kinds of people present. There was Swami Brahmananda and his type, Rakhal, and there was the schoolmaster M and his type. One day Sri Ramakrishna saw Rakhal taking down notes of what he was saying, and he scolded him. He said, "Why are you taking notes?" Well, he had seen M taking notes, so he thought that was a good idea. Everybody should take notes. And the master said, No. That's not your path. You're not supposed to take notes. You should listen attentively, closely to everything I say and take it all in by ear. In other words, he thought Rakhal was above taking notes. What he needed to know would be given him by the master in due measure. But when M missed anything, Sri Ramakrishna would chide him for that. "Oh, didn't you note that? Did you note that? What did I say to so-and-so?" And he had to repeat to him what he had said to Vidyasagar or somebody or other, so that all those things would be sure to be taken down by him in the notes. So there are different ways. I wasn't going to take notes in the first monastery class that I attended in San Francisco, but the Swami there looked at me and the textbook that I had in my hand, and he said, "Why aren't you taking notes?" So I thought, I belong to the lower category. Then he said, followed it up by saying, this will help you later. It will help you later. Oh, and I found out he was right. How much later? Years later, I discovered how much it helped me to have taken those notes, to be able to use them for other people. I didn't know I was going to become a person who would have to give classes, and then I wanted those notes very badly. Another reason for doing this is that at the end of a year, we sort of take stock, don't we? This is done in many religions, many faiths. Muslims, Hindus, Jews, and Christians do it. We look back, take stock, and see what did the year do for us? What have we accomplished? And we make resolutions for the new year. We decide that this coming year I will be different. I will do things in another way. We make our promises to ourselves. We take a new leaf from our notebook and begin to write on it. So in that sense, that this is a time of transition, a very appropriate time to go back over past experience and look forward to new experience. And then I wanted to tell you that what I have to say by way of expansion on the notes that I will read are not given because I think I can do better than the monk who gave the notes. Not at all. They are given because I can oftentimes supply the context for the remark or the details surrounding the utterance. I can remember things that were not written down at the time sometimes, and put it into a framework which will help us to understand better. But the really important part about it is that when we take notes in a diary or a notebook, we are in a sense sowing seeds. We have put down on paper and for our memory the gist of the thought that came at that moment and what was important to us at that time. Later experience, the experience of later years, has a great deal to say about those original observations, doesn't it? We grow, supposedly, although Swami Yogeshananda doesn't like us to use that idea sometimes. We, in the common parlance, we say we grow, at least we unveil. And as we unveil ourselves and the truth within us, our experiences shadow and affect what we originally thought and ripen it sometimes, and sometimes cancel it out altogether. So it is important to add to the observations of the notebook those things which seem to me at this stage of my life to be true in that connection. So notes and commentary, as we do in our Tuesday night class, is what I have in mind here. Now, I know that you think that I'm going to start at the beginning, the earliest ones first, but you are mistaken. I'm not going to. I'm going to start with the last ones first. There are reasons for that, but I tried to decide what would be most important to do first, and I went through and I just finally gave up. So I said, well, let me go and start at the end and work backwards or somehow. I'm going to begin with a more recent entry, a more recent notebook. I have several notebooks, don't worry, this isn't the only thin little notebook I have. But I'm going to begin with a more recent one, and this is going to be like Dr. Karl Haas's mystery composer. I'm not going to tell you whose notes they are at the beginning, whose class they were, and those of you who know some of our Swamis will have the fun of trying to guess who it was as we go along and see if you're right at the end. This Swami's first page starts, our attitude in spiritual life should be a combination of reverence and fearlessness. Now mull that over a little bit, because that's not all that common. I wouldn't have expected to hear that from monks of many different walks, persuasions. Of course, it is understood that a monk's life has to be fearless. And this isn't said just for monks, mind you. Most of what's being said here is not just monastic advice. It's advice for all of us. I hope you understand that. I'm not trying to make monks and nuns out of you. I just want to try to pass on a little of what was given to us, what you use it as best you can. He says our attitude should be one of a combination of reverence and fearlessness. You see how well balanced that is, don't you? Because if you have only reverence, then you become like the snake in Sri Ramakrishna's story, who couldn't hiss and save his own life from being beaten to death. One has to have reverence, because without reverence there isn't humility. Without reverence there isn't respect. There isn't a learning attitude. I want to learn. I've come to this life to learn. If I don't have reverence, how can I learn? I should have sufficient reverence to be able to be open to every influence, good influence that the environment provides. At the same time, as I say, one has to be able to hiss, one has to be able, through an attitude of fearlessness, to stand off one's worldly foes. Family. Uncomprehending family. I fought mine for 30 years. Uncomprehending family wants to drag you back into the maelstrom of all the family relationships. And those poor people think that when they go to heaven, they're going to live in a place where all those other people are too. Well, fearlessness is essential because there are enemies, many enemies of spiritual life, our own senses, our own habits, our past accumulated sanskaras. And the challenge is so great. You are taking up a challenge against the whole of natural life. You are telling yourself inside, I am going to live a spiritual life. I am going to live a life which dares to be different and which dares to defy the traditional habits of myself, my family, my community, my friends, and all of their, perhaps their aspirations and hopes for me. I have to cut a new road through the jungle. Even though many have gone this way before, I know that my way is going to be a little different from everybody else. Fearlessness is necessary. I have found fearlessness to be a little stronger than my reverence. And that's not so good. That got me into a lot of trouble. They should be evenly balanced. A reverence and a fearlessness. Now let's move along here. These are not going to be connected. I told you it wouldn't be thematic. I'm just going to roam through the notes. He says, if I can reduce the whole world to thinker and thought, they're not being causally connected, then causality will disappear. Don't be alarmed. You might say, well, causality, do we want causality to disappear? Yes, we do. We want causality to disappear. Why? Because it is because of the bondage to the law of time, space, and causation that we are under the influence of ignorance or avidya. Our ignorance is made up of our bondage to the concepts of time, space, and causality. I've got to get rid of the idea of causality. That's what the whole Zen program is about. You go to a Zen monk and you have these extraordinary whops over the head and rude remarks and koans that are insolvable and so on. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to break the chain of thought dependence, the chain of causation in the mind, in reason. So what does he say? If I can reduce the whole world to two, the thinker and the thought, and they are not causally connected, then causality will disappear. The thinker doesn't have to think. Think of that. Just think of that. The thinker does not have to think. He can think. He may think. Thinking cannot go on without a thinker, but the thinker doesn't have to think. He can be absolutely stop still, flat out, without a thought. And still, he is the thinker. By the way, these two are delineated in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita under the titles, under the terms Kshetra and Kshetrajna, the field and the knower of the field. The field is the thought, and the knower of the field is the thinker. And these two make up the entire creation. Of course, in Sri Krishna's word, in Sri Krishna's explanation, they are connected. They're connected through him. But that's another story. That's another theology. That the one we're looking at right now says that the whole world can be reduced into these two, the thinker and the field of thought, and they are not causally connected. You think they are causally connected. They seem to be so, but they are not. And if you can do that, then ultimately causality will disappear and enlightenment will come. Along that same line, he says, if you are the ocean, you can create any wave you like, so don't complain. Now think about it. I didn't promise you that I have understood everything that's going to be in this notebook. I didn't promise you that everything that I said I would be able to explain fully to your satisfaction or to mine. All I said was that I was going to read these notes and comment on them. Now, if I have fully understood what he means by this, I would be illumined and I would have no complaints. But the fact of the matter is I have a number of complaints. And so, because I have complaints, I know that I don't understand what he's saying. But isn't it interesting? Listen to it carefully. If you are the ocean, and you know we are, according to the Upanishads, our scriptures tell us, we are the ocean. We are not the waves. The waves are temporary, illusory, vacillating movements upon the great ocean of existence, which we are. And if I am that ocean, then he says, you can create any wave you like. Why should you not be able to fulfill any desire that you might have? Why should you not be able to build a universe according to your own specifications, the way you'd like it? If you are the universe, if you are the ocean. Well, I don't know whether I really understand this or not, because I suspect, though, that I have some inkling on it. And this is what I would say. We think, when we are immature spiritual aspirants, not full-blooded, illumined souls, we think that when we get to the end, we will be able to satisfy all our desires. You see, this is a kind of promise. If you can realize that you are the ocean, then you'll be able to create anything you want to. You'll be a creator along with God, and you'll be able to make a house you like to live in, or a community you enjoy being with, or children that you find obedient. I mean, there are all kinds of things that you can create if you get to that. The hitch of it is, I'm afraid that when we do reach the realization of our being the ocean, most of our desires, if not all of them, are dropped away. That's the rider on this proposition. By the time we get there, our mentality has so changed. We have become so big. We have expanded so much. We're so vast. We feel ourselves to be everywhere. We feel ourselves to be every when. We do not feel that there's a future and a past in the same sense we used to. We don't feel that there is a distance and a close in the same sense we used to. We feel more at one with everything. And because we feel that positive sense of well-being, of achievement, of satisfaction, of completeness, where are our desires? Why should we want to create waves? Don't rock the boat. You get to this place where you feel like saying, well, don't rock the boat. Why should I create waves? Why should I make any trouble for anybody else by demanding something for myself? So maybe you don't want to create waves when you feel that you are the ocean. This is a suspicion that I have, that this was actually underlying this remark. A lot of the things that the great souls tell us, the teachers, are intended to pick us up at the stage where we are and push us forward. They're hooks, they're baited hooks that we bite for. And when we discover what's inside the bait, lo and behold, it wasn't quite what we thought we were biting. And I think this is one of those. Well, he says, don't complain because you are the ocean. This is a good thing. See, if I start to feel complaint about something in my life or my environment, my companions, my age or my body or whatever, it's a way of saying the law of karma, telling us the law of karma. You, at some time in your soul's history, wanted to create a wave like this. You did it. You may not know now that that was you, but there was a you back there, someplace, who thought of a wave like this, and this is the fulfillment of that desire, and so don't be complaining. Make some new ones. Here is a definition, moving on, of meditation. He says, meditation is like this. The water supply is there. You pour it this way and that. Lord, here please, say. Lord, there please. It's not seeking something which is not here. Now, that's very important. This is one of the characteristics of this particular Swami. He always emphasized the positive side of things. The fact that we have ourselves got the resources that we seek. We think that we need to get them from outside. We pour out a heap of prayers. We read so many Bibles. We go to the churches and offer our gifts, and we give donations to charity, and we do all the things that religious people are supposed to do in the hope that somehow out there will be something to please or be pleased to grant us some favors. But you see, he always put it the other way around, that we are in touch with, one with, the source of all supply, and that it is a question of our channeling it. You say to the Lord, who is the water supply, Lord, please pour this way, and then please pour that way. But whatever your prayer is, whether it's worldly or spiritual, be sure that you're not seeking something which is quite far away or apart from you. I think this is very helpful. So in meditation, it's not a straining, it's not a grasping, a groping, a kind of peering into the darkness. It's something way out there and I'm going to somehow discern it, which I often used to do in my early years. It's a question of knowing that the stream is flowing from a reservoir of consciousness. All it has to be done is to give it a little shape, a little form here and there, keep it in a certain direction, a channel. And the next one says, see, these things came out, and we write them down because they were so striking. The conviction comes to us that multiplicity is not an opposing idea or force, but a favoring one. Now, can I give you the significance of this? The whole of our Vedantic life is based on the assumption that we are going from the many to the one. That's taken for granted. The one underlies all this multiplicity. We are distracted by the multiplicity. We are seeking that one. We want to put all these layers of things aside. Peel off the veils, strip off the covers, take off the layers of covering that hide the truth from us, and let us get down to that basic oneness which pervades the whole of existence and which we have forgotten and ignored until it is lost to us completely. This is the idea. And we go from multiplicity to unity. We take our eyes away from all the forms. The Upanishad says, take away the forms of gold. Gold makes ornaments, and clay makes elephants and animals. Take away all these forms and names and go back to the nameless and the formless. So, it's assumed, and it's a practice that we go from the many to the one. Now, what he's saying, not what so many Shankaracharyites have said, that we have to fight the world of many and consider it as a Maya, an enemy to be overcome, to be shunned, to be run away from, renounced, and so on and so forth. He says, the conviction comes to you through spiritual development that multiplicity is not an opposing force or idea, but a favoring one. That is to say, he is giving expression to a kind of bhakti yoga here. You have to take all the ingredients of your world and put them to work for you. Put them to use in the pursuit of your spiritual goal. It's not that multiplicity stands against unity. It is that unity is to be discovered in the multiplicity. See, it's not that these are two different creations and that they have to stand far apart. It's a stepping stone. The world of multiplicity, he says, is a stepping stone which favors, if you use it properly, the revelation of the world of the one. And I think this is extremely helpful, especially to people who have to live in the world. This is really not a monastic counsel, it is a counsel for all of us. A counsel which says that we can be favored by the very things which we think to be inimical if we are clever enough to use them the right way. This is called, he says, Vijnana by Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna talks about jnana and vijnana. Jnana is knowing that there is a oneness hidden by the many. That's jnana. Being positive, being sure, having had a taste of the one who hides behind the many. What is vijnana? Vijnana is seeing, knowing, feeling that one has permeated, penetrated all of the many. Just filled the whole universe of forms with its essence. None of one of them can exist without it. And you see that oneness played out, varied, portrayed by the world of the many. And he says this is the same as Ramana Maharshi's Sahaja Samadhi. Now, those of you who don't know Ramana Maharshi, he was South Indian saint, sage of this century, died not too long ago. The people of South India are very fond of him and very proud of him, and rightly so. Ramana Maharshi used to talk about different kinds of samadhi, and he said his favorite kind was Sahaja Samadhi. Sahaja means spontaneous samadhi, the kind of samadhi in which one lives all the time. So that, well, it's complicated, but people are always looking for a kind of samadhi which is a suspension of the senses, mind, in which trance is created. You go off into the dark, and you look apparently dark, and you are lost to this world, and you don't know what time it is. And when you wake up, you come back and you say, where am I, or where was I, or what shall I eat now? And Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated those kinds of samadhis. But Sri Ramakrishna also had Sahaja Samadhi. And what he describes as Vijnana is what Ramana Maharshi calls Sahaja, spontaneous samadhi. Next one says, on the way to the process, on the way to the negation of causality, there is a mid-stage position. That is to say, there's a landing on the staircase which goes up to non-causality. And what does he call that landing? Movement by remote control. Now let me explain this a little bit. To move this body, he says, one does not need to be in it, like a spaceship moved by remote control. You've seen the little boys on the ponds playing with their sailboats, their ships, and how they have a remote control device by which they guide the control of that boat. It makes it speed up and slow down, crash into the beach and other boats. And you've seen the airplanes that are flown by the kids, their remote controlled devices. And you know that one doesn't necessarily have to be in a vehicle in order to be running that vehicle, in order to be making the movements of that vehicle. Exactly so, he's saying, is the condition of the aspirant at the halfway stage. There comes a time, this I can say to some extent from later experience, there comes a time when one feels that somebody else is operating this human vehicle we call the body. One feels that one is not directly connected with the operations of this instrument. That one is somehow being operated from a distance. Movement by remote control. The Atman, who is really the Antaryami or inner controller, is seated somewhere inside the body, and from that relay station is directing the movement of hands and arms and eyes and feet, and ears and so on. Then as we move on up the stairs, this feeling of remote control also disappears, and we reach a stage where we become actionless. As the Gita says, actionlessness is yoga. We reach a state where we do no longer feel that we are doing anything at all, and causality is at an end. As we think, so nature becomes. Now that's, again, putting the responsibility on you. The power is in your hands. The power is in our hands. We have the responsibility of directing the stream in the way in which we would like it to go. And he says, as we think, so nature becomes. Nature is like the reservoir. Thought is a kind of suction, bringing in its like. That is to say, I want to live spiritual life. More than trying to go out and get something which I don't have, or applying at an office which is dispensing things, I have to think in terms of directing my thought into a channel, which channel is occupied by others of a similar nature and thought, who will be ready to move with me in my progress. If I think true thoughts, if I think good thoughts, generous thoughts, thoughts of welfare and well-being, then all the people, all the minds in this web of mentality in this universe, who are like-minded and want those things, will be attracted by those thoughts. I create a kind of suction by saying, oh, wonderful, wonderful divine being, let me put myself in such a position with respect to you that these effects or these results are brought forth. Well, you bring yourself in touch that way with the forces which think in those terms that are like that. And so the nature around you, which is after all the only nature you know, the nature in your immediate vicinity is made to be of such a nature as is conforming to your desire. And then this one I started with, the thinker need not always think any more than a dancer need always be dancing. See? The mind is an instrument. Thought is material. Thought in action is a drama, is a dance. It's a play. And he says the thinker need not always be thinking any more than a dancer need always be dancing. So why not call God the thinker? He can think and he need not think. And then he talked about the different states of consciousness, which I'm not going to go into right now. But he said, nice little epigram, the waking state is God in a package. The waking state is God in a package. Take off the Christmas wrappings, take off the box, and you'll get to the inside and find who is really there. That is the true, pure consciousness, God in His own pure consciousness. He tells about an experience that he had with one of our senior swamis, and I'm going to tell you that little story. The swami in question was my own teacher, Swami Yogeshananda, who was in charge of one of our centers in India at this time. And this Swami was junior to him a little bit and was serving under him in the center. And Swami Yogeshananda, who later became our vice president of the order, said to him, once reprimanded him and said, "Let me tell you something. You are too much in a hurry. You want to get a lot done, but you will have to be patient about getting control of things. Can you not wait for nature to open the door?" Well, you know, I didn't read this again until many years afterwards. When I read it again, I saw how applicable it was to me. I'm a person like that, I think, too. I try to get a lot done and get in a hurry, get impatient to have control over things. But this is such an interesting question. Can you not wait for nature, the capital N, to open the door? Our relationship to the divine will, to nature, another way of putting it, isn't it? The divine will, or our relationship to nature, is like that. It's one of give and take. We push a little and we wait a lot. And suddenly a door opens and we fall through. The best things that have ever come to me in life were not things that I'd struggled for at all. The best things that have ever reached me in life are not things for which I worked, for which I thought I was going to work up a resume. Were not. They were just doors that opened suddenly. I was in San Francisco, minding my own business as a monk in training, a brahmachari, when on the Master's birthday in 1960, the Swami in charge called me to his side and said, "Have you ever lived in New York?" I said, "No, I lived in New York. Would you like to?" There's a Swami coming from India who needs an attendant, and you are to go there and nurse him. Well, I couldn't have dreamed that. I couldn't have worked for that. I couldn't have done anything to. It changed my whole life. So I say, when he opens the door, sometimes we fall through. When the nature is gracious. But here is the case of a man, the author of the notes, who is very impatient and who will not wait for nature to open the door, but insists on knocking on it and maybe battering it down. He's being reprimanded by his superior. He remarks that Swami Yogeshananda, by the way, was a very considerate man, but a little ascetic. He did not like laxity. For example, his considerateness. The Swami was to go to Madras, and Swami Yogeshananda asked him, "When will you start for Madras?" "Tomorrow?" And the Swami said, "Yes." And Swami Yogeshananda said, No, don't do that. You have never seen Benares, Kashi. You have never seen Benares. Take some money and go there first on the way." Totally unnecessary. What head of a center would bother to send you to a place you hadn't seen just because you hadn't seen it? So he said, very considerate person. And the Swami says, "I try to cultivate in everything an attitude of sportsmanlike fearlessness. All my teaching, all my study, everything is designed around that." And I echo that. I say that's bravo. I think that's just great. A sportsmanlike fearlessness. To me, monastic life is nothing if it is not athleticism. I really feel that I probably, if I'd had a different kind of body, different size and shape and strength, I would have been a sports coach, because there's probably nothing that really fires me up so much as that attitude that the coach has to inculcate in his players. And as I've gone along through monastic life, through spiritual life, I've found that where we most often tumble and come a cropper is where we have not been sufficiently athletic and sufficiently resilient and sufficiently fearless and sufficiently sportive. And there are lots and lots of blows to be taken in the ring, and those who can take the pounding, they win the round and win the fight. So I would certainly echo that statement. And he did also get a number of blows himself. He has had a number of blows in life, I know. Here's another interesting story about him which he tells on himself. Even after taking sannyasa, which is the final vow of a monk, see, we take 2 sets of vows in our order, in all the monastic orders in India. Usually, we take the vow of a brahmachari, which is the first novitiate vows, after a period of whatever it is, 5 years in our order. You take the vow of a novice. And then, after another equal period, you are given the vows of a sannyasin, or a monk, full monk. And you get a name, Swami, so and so. Well, this is what he says. Even after taking my sannyasa vows, I didn't have a rosary. No, beads. Mala. He never missed it. But when he went to Belur Mart, someone noticed it. I must mention to you, it's a very nosy place. One of our swamis used to say, in San Francisco, used to say, monastic life is like living in a glass house. There aren't... I do it my way. We all have rosaries, you know. Mahapurush Maharaj, your guru, Swami Shivananda, must have forgotten to give you one. Why not go and ask him for it? This is called being conned. I was foolishly naive, and I was brainwashed, says the Swami. So one day I went to Swami Shivananda and said I had something to ask of him. He asked me to sit before him solemnly and in his room. And he said, yes, what is it? Maharaj, I said, I don't have any rosaries. The president didn't laugh. He just kept still a minute. I don't sell them, he said. The Swami later got one for himself and took it to Swami Shivananda for official blessing. So he put all the dots on the I's and crosses on the T's, and did all the things that were considered proper. But he was a maverick, and has always been, and so he says he feels the omission was deliberate. The guru feared the disciple would divert his attention from God to the counting. Now that's an afterthought. I like the story just as well without that, but he presumes, he opines that Mahapurush Maharaj deliberately didn't give him a rosary for fear that he would be distracted from the pursuit of God by trying to count his japa on beads. The next one is a real sore prod. It's a real thorn in the side. I hope you can take it. I can't. The most foolish thing that we can do is ego culture. The most foolish thing we can do is ego culture. Look, if one says, let me be a teacher, then all others must become fools. God must become a crowd of ignoramuses in order to provide an audience for me. Well, I'm glad there aren't so many people here this morning because there are fewer people to become ignoramuses in order for me to talk. You see, if you think you are a teacher, if that egoistic thought comes to us who have to teach, who have to give classes and talk, then in order to teach there has to be a taught. And if you think that somebody needs to be taught, then you think he must be ignorant. And if you think he's ignorant, how can you think of him as Brahman? I get up here and I speak. We all do that, the Swamis, we speak. And we say, oh, I look upon all of you as Brahman. Before I come here, I think my audience is Brahman. I'm speaking to Brahman. That's a nice thing to say to yourself, but if you are really persuaded at the moment that that is Brahman and nothing else, how will you be able to open your mouth? Maybe you can. I don't know, but it's a way. This is something you have to think about a lot. But I never heard anybody else say that before, and it's really worth pondering. There has to be, he says, humility, compassion. The heart must be an open door. This is absolutely necessary. It's the same thing Swami Yogeshananda always said. If you think that you are a benefactor, that you are a charitable person, and in your charity and your giving, you mount up on a pedestal and you pass down to the poor man your philanthropic gift or your hospital work or whatever it is that you're doing for him, and you think you are bestowing something upon someone who needs it and deserves a break and so on and so forth, then all those thoughts are really contrary to the primary thought that we should be having in our mind, that we and all other beings are integral parts of one vast network, divine, ubiquitous, eternal, everlasting, omnipresent. But I like this. This is a wonderful thing to be told, that if you are cultivating the ego, even with the thought of what you are giving or doing for others, then indeed you are a foolish person. Well, this next section is about prana, and that was the topic. Prana, the life force, and so these are somewhat related. First one is, we live by breathing. Surely God lives without it. I hope we'll agree to that. I am everywhere. I am this. I am that. See, this is quite different from the usual Advaitic, monastic, Shankarite discipline of not this, not that. Brahman is not anything that you can point to, not anything you can speak of, not anything that you can look at. Brahman is just different from and other than and apart from all the sense experience. He asks us to say it in another way. He says, tell yourself, remind yourself, I am everywhere. I am this. I am that. I have no enemy. Therefore I have no enemy. I have no problem. I have no challenge. Nobody can injure me because I am that. And he says there is such a thing as too quick fulfillment. We want a lot of exertion and busyness to get what we want. If the mind just grants our desire, what's the use? I bet you never thought that way before. We complain you see, about all of the struggle in spiritual life. We complain how much we have to work, how hard it is, how laborious it is, and how far that the goal is seems to be away, what a long distance we've had to travel. One man told one of our Swamis, he said, "Swami, I have been coming to the shrine every day for 25 years and holding out my tongue, as it were, and Sri Ramakrishna has not come along and written on it." We are conscious of our effort, of our labor, of our exasperation, our endurance, our patience, our powers of stability, our powers of endurance. But you see, he says there's such a thing as too quick fulfillment. If the mind immediately granted you illumination and you didn't have to struggle for it and didn't have to go through this laborious process of finding the truth and discovering it, would you appreciate it? Would there be any fun? That's something to think about when things get going tough. When things hang tough and you feel that you are at on your last legs, well, there's something in you too that doesn't want to be given the goal and the gift too quickly. You want some exertion. You want some busyness. Now then, he says, when you talk to someone or laugh, you send a multiple warhead right into his mind. This is his very, very graphic language that he often used. He says, words have power. Prana has power. Our words have prana behind them. He used to say that our words are much more powerful than we realize. After all, when you say, Jesus said, you call somebody thou fool, don't call anybody a fool lest you be in danger of judgment. We have the habit of thinking that words are nothing. They are simply froth. And we cannot be hurt by words, but we can. We can be hurt by anybody's words. We can also be benefited by words. So he says, when you talk to someone, when you laugh, I think this was directed particularly at monks, because in monastic life, they all say, you acquire a certain amount of power, a certain build-up of charge of power occurs, even if you are not a good monk, if you're even just a very poor, struggling monk, still at the same time, a kind of reservoir of power builds up just from your asceticism, and that puts itself behind what you say and what you do, even your laughs and your remarks. You live around a holy man for a while and you'll discover that everything he does, even the slightest small things, seem to have a punch to them that others do not have. So perhaps this was in his mind in talking to us. He says you send a multiple warhead right into the mind of the other person. So be careful what you send. The quantum theory, in a way, is demonstrated here. A burst of energy. Quanta. The energy is transmitted in quantum theory in sudden bursts, which are unconnected, seem to be unconnected anyway. And so he says, energy is all of a package. And he talks about energy being accumulated in your cheek before being suddenly spat out in what we call expression. Now there again, very graphic language. A chewer of tobacco goes on munching on this wad until he gets quite a load of saliva, and then suddenly he spits it out. And he said this is what we call the cheek of expression, which precedes the expression. And there is power there. And it comes out in bursts. How prana operates, you see. Now here's a very helpful remark. Fears are unnecessary because the universe is not designed to go wrong. The deeper we go, the more we discover this. tragedies occur only in the bhuta-matras, the gross elements. Now, I've explained this a little bit. The Vedanta cosmology is made up of various degrees of manifestation of reality. The theory is, the explanation given is that from the unmanifest, the first stage of manifestation is called the causal body, or the causal universe, the universe which is in such a shadowy, suggested form that you can hardly make out any kind of shape in it. Gradually that causal level becomes what we call the subtle level. And this is like the cartoon of an artist. The artist sketches out in a cartoon, a plate thing on paper or on the canvas, where he's going to have the head of the portrait, and where he's going to have the book that the person is holding, how big it will be, and so on. Just, he sketches out his preliminary sketch. This is the subtle stage of the universe, where everything is in ideas and nothing has taken concrete form as yet. Then come, these are the tanmatras, then come the bhuta-matras. The bhuta-matras are the gross elements which are brought into combination in such a way that the thought or the plan of the Creator is put into a box. As he said, this waking state is God in a box. So God builds first an idea box, and then he builds the actual box that goes under the Christmas tree and wraps it in wrappings. And that is the level where tragedy occurs. Now, you understand? The Swami is saying that the more that our mind dwells on the superficial, the more it is caught by the lights and sounds and smells and tastes and touches and feels of this universe, the more likely is tragedy to occur. We have tragedy at the level of the bhuta-matras. But the deeper we go, the more detached we become from the tinsel of life. The more I go to penetrate to the heart of that Christmas tree, rather than to take its surface, the more I discover the springs of life. I discover the core of reality. I find out where the processes of growth and life and nourishment, and where roots are, how roots pick up their materials and feed the tree. The whole process of the feeding of the tree and the working out of the life of a tree is discovered only when we go deeper into its processes and analyze its cells and the nuclei of the cells and so on. We find there is an inner controller to the Christmas tree, which is the source and cause of the tree. And these things that have been put on the surface, the ornaments and the lights and the tinsels and all these things, are just adventitious upadhis, overlays, superstructures that do not really matter to the core of reality. And if our mind, through meditation and spiritual practice, can dive deeper into the heart and the core of reality, the chances of our finding tragedy are much less. So, that's how I would explain this. He says, fears. He puts it in the plural. That's a little more easy to get hold of. It's more concrete for us rather than the singular. Fears are unnecessary because the universe is not fundamentally designed to go wrong. The deeper we go, the more we discover this. Tragedies in quotes. He puts the tragedies in quotation marks because they're not really tragedies. Tragedies occur only in the bhuta-matras, the externals. You know, in Sanskrit drama, there are no tragedies. There are lots of beautiful Sanskrit dramas, Kalidasas, Manas, other people. Valmiki. But the real rule for Sanskrit drama is Nothing should have an unhappy ending. Well, you say that's just Hollywood. No, they aren't Hollywood endings. They're not contrived happiness. They are resolutions which make you understand the basic nature of this universe and its divine design. So, in the long run, things cannot end tragically. Well, I'm going to wind up with one more. What you think, you get. In the shape in which you pour the stuff of the mind, in that shape you will reap it, you will find it, retrieve it. But the ways are different. And if I say, sheep, 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 either I will get wool, or become a shepherd, or a butcher.